Hello, the Slavic Prime Minister has been shot. Life-threatening injuries after the shooting. Longtime leader Robert Fico is hospitalized, and the suspected gunman is apprehended. He's a populist prime minister and longtime leader. He was in critical condition after being shot multiple times by an unidentified gunman, his office and his party said Wednesday. The suspected gunman was apprehended in the city of Handlova, east of the Slavic capital. He was shot multiple times, life-threatening condition. Next few hours will be decisive, they said on the Facebook page. So, that sucks.
Didn't he just come out and say something about holding the COVID pandemic people responsible?
Not just that, he did. And he also just came out for against Ukraine being a member of NATO. Pretty two.
There's two groups that would probably knock him off.
That's kind of two.
Sorry, I didn't mean to be negative there.
No, by the way, that's Nate Jones. How are you, Nate?
Doing great. Just came from my daughter's school. She's doing a little activity, so I was a little late. Sorry, I apologize.
No worries.
It's way more important.
Yeah.
You're the president of, how do you say it?
Xlear.
It's pronounced Clear.
Clear?
My dad came up with it. The product we started with is a nasal spray that clears your nose, and the active ingredient in it that does the magic is xylitol. So the X is for the xylitol, and it's pronounced Clear.
Xylitol is like this kind of magic ingredient, is it not? Like it's
I'm not
what's
gonna say
put
it's
in
magic.
like guns. I mean, not
in
in
guns?
Sorry, not in guns.
This guy's.
I have
definitely
guns.
This
I
guy's
have-
definitely from Utah.
I have guns on my mind, actually. It's put in gum, right? Like
Yeah.
Trident and things like that.
Trident doesn't really have enough to do anything other than say, "Hey, we have xylitol."
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's 50 years plus research showing how it. I mean, we can get into this later, but how it prevents tooth decay.
Okay.
I think one of the failings of our public health department, especially here in Utah, is that they haven't implemented any gum chewing programs in the elementary schools.
Like chewing gum is good.
Absolutely.
Yeah. As long as it's not like the sugary stuff.
Yeah, the sugar ones would actually cause more cavities. They've done studies. I mean, University of Michigan did a study down in Belize where they just gave kids, and no other interventions, they just gave kids 3 pieces of gum, one in the morning when they got to school, one after lunch, one before they went home, and they reduced tooth decay to practically nothing, and reduced respiratory infections by 42%. And the cost to do that would be about $25 a kid per year. And when I call out, I probably shouldn't speak ill of our public health here in Utah, but
You can.
during COVID, we actually threw away about $750,000 worth of gum, xylitol gum, before we threw it away. It was just because it was short dated. People weren't standing in line buying a little package; they were buying bigger packets. So we actually talked to the Utah Department of Health and the schools and tried to get it to where we could hand it out in schools. And we sat down, and this was just bizarre because this young lady came in and said, well, okay, so if you give us the gum to do it in a couple of schools and it works, who's going to pay for it the next year? And I had sat there for a minute, and the dentist that was sitting here with me sat there, and we're looking at each other like, the state, obviously, because you're going to save so much money that it's going to be ridiculous. And she says, well, we have in our budget right now to pay the doctors and the dentists to see these kids after they get tooth decay, after they get sick. And I said, well, then you're going to save money there. And if you don't save money there, then and she goes, well, I think in my expertise, I think it's more important that we save that money to pay the doctors and the dentists to see the kids after they get sick so that they can all have equal access to health care. So they would rather spend thousands of dollars as opposed to $25, have the kids get sick, have them get cavities, and then pay the doctors to come in and treat them, than pay $25 to prevent that from happening.
Why don't we focus more on preventative care
Money.
as a society?
100% it's money.
Well, that means it's like regulatory capture is what you mean by that,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Like where the doctors and, all the people who are on the care side have control of the legislature and those who are in power, right? Because it doesn't actually make sense from if it's strictly a money perspective, then you would do what you just suggested. You'd start at the preventive thing because then you would save money. But because it's about regulatory capture and all about like the people who provide the care have lobbyists, some of them are even, all that type of stuff. Is it maybe because of that? Would that be a part of it?
Oh, no, that when I say the money, that's where it is.
Oh, I see.
There's no money in prevention. I mean, you could draw a diagram. I mean, if you had a whiteboard in here, I'd draw it up for you. I'd do it all the time for people. But if you take a line and you say you're perfectly healthy, you're over here to the left, and over here you're just dead, you're sick, and you're dead. Where's the cheapest place to treat that illness?
Left.
It's way over to the left.
Yeah.
But yet 95%, in fact, more than 95% of our money is spent in sick care, not in health care.
Yeah.
I mean, if and the thing is that the actions that our government, our federal government, are taking is actually making that worse. It's gonna move more of that to sick care as opposed to health care. I mean, the FTC is they're going after companies right now. I mean, they're going after us, and what they're trying to do is they've actually started suing companies, saying in the supplement in the natural products industry, which Utah has a big part in, that if you don't have 2 RCT studies backing up every health claim for each product, then you're breaking the law. And that is just absolutely ridiculously stupid. And the reason why that is because the FDA doesn't even ask that of drugs. I mean, think of it this way. You read about the last vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
That was approved on an in-lab study with 6 or 8, I think it was 8 rats. No human trials, no RCTs. And they approved, the latest round of vaccines.
Yeah. What? Tell us what an RCT is actually.
A random controlled trial.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, this has started off in a very, regulatory capture and the idea that we wait until something goes wrong and then we try to fix it and put all the money in it makes no sense at all.
Yeah.
Unless you're a pharmaceutical or a hospital company.
Yeah.
Yeah, then it makes a lot of sense, right?
Because we've had, 4 or 5 guests over the last couple of months that take this stance as well, right? Of it gets really expensive once you're sick and once you're fat and once you're depressed and all of that.
Are you calling me out?
No. I'm just talking about me. And, it's just common sense of, the best way to mitigate all that is to get out ahead of it. But we've kind of jumped ahead. I'd be interested in the founding story of Xlear and then the products that you have. And what was the first product? Was it the nasal?
Yeah. So the first product. So let me. I've been doing it. We started the company 24 years ago. It's not like we're a fly-by-night company. We sell products all over the world. We sell them in CVS, Rite Aid, Walgreens, Target, Smith's. We sell them in most of your natural retailers. I'm trying to think of all. I mean, you can buy them everywhere.
Yeah.
But the number one product that we have is actually a nasal spray. And it came about because my dad started reading studies that were out there about how when kids chew gum with xylitol, so they've known, let me back up even further. They started doing research on xylitol in the 60s. And they've known since the late 60s, early 70s that xylitol prevents tooth decay. Very effective at doing that. But it does it in a way that's different. And you want to talk about regulatory capture, the ADA, for all of their corruption, I didn't say that out loud, did I?
You did.
Sorry. But the ADA, okay. They've hung their hat on fluoride. And the use of fluoride, especially the use of fluoride in our water, is about the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. And I can argue that till the cows come home, and it just doesn't make sense. But what they're doing is they're hanging their hat on fluoride, and they're ignoring everything else out there. And and I'll give you an example of how they work, because xylitol and fluoride work differently. Fluoride actually makes your enamel stronger. Okay, if you use it like they tell you to use it, the whole goal is to make your enamel stronger. And what xylitol does is it actually gets rid of the bacteria that cause cavities. Using fluoride and nothing else, that's kind of like saying, it's not treating the illness. They don't look at tooth decay as an illness, as a bacterial infection, which it is. If you get rid of the strep mutans in your mouth, you don't get tooth decay. That's pretty much the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
And they've known that for a very long time. It's not, this isn't new science. But the ADA's hung their hat on fluoride, and now they're saying you need more fluoride, and they don't go and think about it in any other way. And I use an analogy, a little story. I don't know if it's an analogy, but if you think of your tooth as a castle sitting on top of this hill, and fluoride is the mason that builds the wall. It makes it strong, which you do want. You want your teeth to be strong. But what xylitol does, if you have an army of bacteria down here and they're using their trebuchets and their catapults and they're shooting that that acid up there at your tooth, how long can your mason keep up before the army of bacteria wins? Xylitol gets rid of the bacteria creating the acid. And again, they've known that for decades. This is nothing new. They've known it for, since before you guys were probably born. No, I'm kidding.
Where does xylitol come from?
It's very common in nature. It's a polysaccharide that they use in cell walls, plants. I mean, commercially it comes out of birch bark, corn cobs, not the corn kernel, but the corn cob. You can even get it out of sugar cane after they've gotten all the sugar sap, the sugar juice out. The cell walls in the cane, it's called bagasse, Bagass, but they can get xylitol out of that.
Interesting. It's all fun and games until you get a toothache.
I know.
Right?
I can't relate. I haven't had one.
Yeah. And it's infuriating that there are solutions out there, because if you don't have the means or the money or the time and you've got a toothache, your day is ruined, your week is ruined, your month is ruined.
Well, I mean, not to throw back because, it's all about the kids always, but even when we were going around trying to find places to use this gum productively rather than dumping it in a dumpster, we went to schools here in Utah and tried to get the school nurses, and they couldn't do it unless they'd kick it up the can. But we had, so many of them would sit there and tell you stories that just make you want to cry about kids that are coming into school and their teeth are so rotten, hurting, that they can't concentrate. But they won't tell their parents about it because they know their parents don't have the money to go pay a dentist to treat it.
Mm-hmm.
And so these kids, you're talking about little kids in second, third, fourth grade that are having to deal with that. You think it ruins your day? Think of how it ruins a third graders.
Yeah, it's not going to be possible.
And these people wouldn't even allow us to go in there and give them some free gum that would help.
Yeah, so this isn't even pie in the sky snake oil. It's like basic scientific knowledge and
thousands of studies showing that it works.
And then the nasal spray. That's all fun and games until you get sick for no apparent reason.
Like I said, I can't relate. No. That's exactly what it is. So, but my dad invented it to prevent ear infections in babies, and so that's what we started it with. It was to treat ear infections, to prevent ear infections in babies. And the way our government regulatory agencies are set up, we can't say what it does. And so, we'd have to go out and educate doctors as to why does washing your nose make sense? Why does hygiene make sense? And, we'd sit there and it'd usually take them 5 or 6 minutes before they're like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Oh,
mm-hmm.
Yeah. But it does.
Yeah. It's kind of the filter, and it makes perfect sense.
So how do you use it? Do you do it like every day?
Spray it, put it with your toothbrush. When you brush your
see.
teeth, wash your nose. It's just, I should have brought a bottle. It just squirt. I could run down to my car and grab a bottle.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's very cool.
But if I'd known this was a video, I would have brought a couple of bottles of product.
No worries. Yeah, so I like your confidence, right? Like your two, I wouldn't know, replies.
I have a 13-year-old daughter, and I tell this, and I tell people this all the time. She's my deathly ill child. She spent maybe a week of her life sick. And my other child that's 11, she's never been sick a day in her life. She doesn't know what it's like to be sick. And I believe, honestly, that should be the norm. That should not be the exception. My kids travel the world with me. 2 weeks from now we'll be in Dubai and Thailand. It's not like they live a protected life where they don't get out and mix.
Yeah.
But, when you stop and think about it, the vast majority of times that you go to see a doctor or that you're sick, where does it start?
With like the sniffles?
Yeah, it starts in your nose. It's exactly what you said. It starts in your nose. How is that not such a common sense thing that if, the vast majority of your illnesses that you go to see a doctor, colds, flus, COVID, allergies, asthma. Asthma is a disease of the lungs, but most of the triggers are in your upper airway.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think of all these things that you go to the doctor for, and 80% of them, I guess, I don't know, are going to be in your nose. And so if you can put something in your snot that blocks bacteria, that blocks viruses, and that thins out your mucus so it actually traps more pollen and dander and all these other things and washes them out faster, tell me how that's not going to work.
Yeah.
How did that work during COVID for those who are using it?
Well, the government's suing me for sharing studies, published studies, talking about that.
Really?
Yeah.
The FTC?
Yeah.
What? Why?
Well, we're still trying to figure that out.
That doesn't make sense the way the FTC would be suing you for pushing studies out. That's crazy. That's the weirdest thing ever.
Well, I think it's corruption. I do. I don't think there's not even a fifth grader would understand that. So let me go back to it. We didn't come in here to talk about that, but the FTC they're intent on destroying the natural products industry. They are, and I think this just got cut up in that. But in early 2020, there were doctors that were writing articles about using saltwater irrigation in the Journal of the American Medical Association. Okay, on the CDC's webpage, they had the best way to treat the symptoms of a coronavirus infection was through saline irrigation. There was a study that was done at Vanderbilt University in April, May of 2020, where they had a bunch of people that were over 60. I think it was 60 people over the age of 65. They all tested positive. They all had symptoms, and they just used salt water. 100% of them were better in under a week. And the company, and we had the data from that study, and when we tried to share it, the government sent us a warning letter and said, don't share it. When the other companies started to share it, they got a warning letter from the government not to share it. This is published stuff. This was paid for by the NIH, the government. It was done at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, respected as, I'm guessing. I never went there, but
it's a respected university.
And so NeilMed, one of our competitors, they received a warning letter. Navage, the battery and the pump and the vacuum that's the full waterboarding experience. They got a warning letter. We got a warning letter, and there's a couple other companies. They all get warning letters not to share the data.
That's wild.
If you pull them up, just go Google NeilMed, Navage, Xlear. They're out there.
Wow. And now you're currently in a lawsuit against FTC.
Yeah.
This is a crazy FTC too. This one in particular is pretty wild.
They're bonkers.
Yeah.
The stuff that's come out in that lawsuit it's so crazy. You have a bunch of, I don't want to use the R word, but you have a bunch of idiots in there because they went after companies that were sharing published data from studies that could have saved hundreds of thousands of people's lives. How many people died from COVID after May of 2020?
A lot.
Yeah, millions, right?
Yeah. And I think a big chunk of that they could have been saved with a 5-cent solution of salt water.
That's wild.
But all the other companies, they kowtowed and backed down and said, okay, we don't want to fight the FTC. But some of the things we found, and we can get back to Utah part of this, and how it is going to affect business in Utah going forward. But, some of the things that we found in these depositions is we could have sent them studies, any study, because what we learned is that the people at the FTC, we sent them all the data backing up every single claim that we made. We had studies showing xylitol blocks adhesion of SARS-CoV-2. They said, we don't like these studies. You have to do a different study. But all of these studies, they never even opened them and read them. They said, and they told us this in our depositions, it wasn't on the news, and so it wasn't true.
No way. I feel like the exact opposite. If it's on the news, it's not true.
Probably.
So you're not currently a big fan of a lot of government institutions and policies, it sounds like.
Not at all. I've become very cynical of our government and any benevolence that comes from that, because I've learned that there's not much.
Yeah.
And you've experienced this in the state of Utah itself.
Yeah.
And how do you think this affects Utah moving forward?
I think that what the FTC is trying to do is going to, I think they're trying, and I think it's deliberate. I don't think it's accidental, but for them to come out, and so I'm trying to think how to say this. If I knew this was where the conversation was going, I would have, brought in some websites and some printouts and stuff. But the FTC back in 98, they put out some guidance. And so and as I did, up until 3 years ago, I this has never been anything that I've really learned about, but I've spent a lot of money learning about it in the last 3 years. The FTC has guidelines. They have rules and laws, and their job is to enforce these laws. And the law says that companies cannot make false or misleading statements. Okay? So the law is false and misleading statements. Then they put out employee guidance. And this is what's crazy about this is it's employee guidance. It's for the internal employees. But yet they're suing companies based not on the law, but they're suing companies and sending warning letters out based on their internal employee guidance. Does that make sense?
So what does that internal employee guidance mean?
Well, that's the question, because they're saying, and they told us, they said, yeah, this is only staff guidance. Okay, but you're suing companies based on staff guidance. You're not suing me based on making a false or misleading statement, because I haven't made any false or misleading statements. You're saying I'm making a statement that's unsubstantiated, but I'm giving you a bunch of studies that's saying it's substantiated. The stupidity of what they said is, I'll give you a good example, is they said, you can't say that xylitol blocks adhesion of SARS-CoV-2 to tissue because you don't have an RCT showing that. And I'm like, okay, show me how to design an RCT to do that, because that isn't an RCT study. That's a lab study. You do that in a lab. Okay? Yeah. And they said, we're not here to give you advice. We're not here to give you legal advice. We're just telling you what you need to do.
You got to pay for the legal advice, right?
It's because they don't know what the hell they're talking about.
Yeah.
Because it's not the kind of study you do in an RCT. In an RCT study, we applied to go do an RCT study with the government, with the FDA, with COVID patients, and they said, no, we can't do that. But that's where you're actually going and spraying it in the nose and looking at people living. Where you're looking at blocking adhesion, you do that in a lab. That's, fairly simple. That's the way they do it.
Yeah.
By the way, why is the FTC involved in this, not the FDA?
Again, that's one of those big mysteries of faith that you just have to, the government knows best. We know that the FTC, they went to the FDA and said, hey, we're going to go sue this company in Xlear in Utah because they're making, health claims. And the FDA actually responded and said, we've looked at it. They're not doing anything. They're fine.
To me, it seems like the FDA would be who governs you, not FTC. FTC would be like, if you were making false or misleading statements, that's the only time that they would come in.
Well, if you're a government agency, the way you do things, and again, I've learned, is if your area of authority is this, they want it to be this, with the dream of it being this.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And they are. And they're going after it. And the FTC has a habit of in the health space, going after small companies. And then again, that's where it's gonna hurt innovation. It's gonna drive up the cost of your supplements. And people sit there and they say, well, the supplement industry needs to be regulated tighter. I don't disagree, but I think first of all, you need to get the pharmaceutical companies to where they're effectively regulated, because the FDA is not regulating the drug industry. We have so many recalls. We have so many drugs that are approved, that are out there. Hell, the COVID vaccines. Mm-hmm. I think they're doing more harm than they are good. You have opioids. You have, the list goes on and on about drugs that have had issues. More people use supplements than use pharmaceuticals. Okay? But you have millions of adverse events reported every year for people using pharmaceuticals. You have a couple of thousand for people using supplements. Okay, so if somebody wants to come out and argue and say, well, they need to be better regulated, well, hell, go regulate the one that's causing the most harm first.
Yeah. But that is the very definition of regulatory capture there.
Yeah.
It's the same people. make
So they put out this guidance, the staff guidance. Let me get back on topic, but they put out the staff guidance in 1998, saying that you had to have. I'm trying to remember the exact verbiage, but it's you have to have studies backing up what you're saying. Okay, and that's really what it was. You can't just go out and say, my curcumin or my little herb cures cancer. You can't just go out and say something like that. You have to have studies showing it up. Truth in advertising. And as long as you had a study, then you could say it. Now, if you're talking about effectiveness, then that would be where the FDA would come in and get involved, because now you're making a drug claim. And in 2022, am I right on my years? In 2022, after they sued us, the government, the FTC, came out with new staff guidance. Again, these are not laws. It's staff guidance saying that what is false or misleading is now you have to have 2 RCT studies for each health claim for each finished product. And so now you're like 3 levels away from actually what the law says, because now they're giving staff guidance, 2 staff guidance on top of staff guidance, and the law is still way over here. And it's, the idea is we think they're moving the goalpost, but they're not. They're just telling us they're moving the goalpost, and that now you have to go over here, but yet the goalpost is still, don't make false and misleading statements. And we can all get on that. We all agree with that. I think everybody in the industry agrees with that.
Yeah.
And it's pretty easy. It's pretty easy if someone's making false or misleading statements to come in and prove them wrong. Okay? Does this cure your glaucoma? Okay, go give it to some people with glaucoma and see if it cures them.
Yeah.
Guess what? It doesn't.
Yeah.
Which is the main reason, like, Silicon Slopes has never gotten into supplements or pharmaceuticals. We get intimidated by those studies.
The main reason.
Well, I mean, it's just absolutely bizarre what the FTC is doing, and I do think that I think that the Utah, and I've tried to get involved, but such a small amount of our business and time is spent in Utah, that I haven't had the time to really do it. But somebody, and I think our state legislature needs to really examine what's going on, because that's a huge segment of our state economy. But if they're succeeding, that's really what they're going to do. And the rule that the staff guidance that they put out there is so vague that you could wrap up an app on your phone that helps you sleep, that plays you could put in there and say this thing plays happy music so you can sleep better. And in essence, that could be considered a health claim. And do you have 2 RCT studies showing that your little app that plays music while you sleep helps you sleep better?
Yeah. Can the FTC even read RTC studies or RCT studies?
I don't know, because they don't know how to open an email attachment.
To me, again, that goes to like the FDA should be doing that. I really don't get why the FTC is even involved. That's so weird.
Well, there's probably a slow day at the FTC, and they're like looking around and they're like, where else can we? Oh, let's just encroach on that territory and throw some lawsuits.
I mean, I can't knock the FTC, because I'm telling you, they have some of the best lawyers. They have some of the best lawyers in the world, and I really mean that. And let me explain why I mean that. Is because in our depositions, we asked one of their lawyers, who said, "Hey, how long have you been working at the FTC?" Since 2001, so 23 years. Okay, almost a quarter of a century. How many times do you remember the FTC sending out a warning letter to an entity, a person or a company, and saying, hey, you don't have data to back up your studies, and then that company or the person provides you with studies, and you say, oh, no, our bad. And in that 23-year time frame, how many times do you think that happened? Where the
0.
FTC admitted that they were wrong and said, okay, you're good, let's go.
I can't imagine it happening ever.
0.
Yeah.
I mean, so these guys are batting 1,000 for a quarter of a century. These guys are the best quality lawyers you can get.
Yeah.
They don't know how to open an attachment, but they do know their stuff.
Yeah.
So on the business side of things, and for you, like, at what point do you get the xylitol, and at what point do you start manufacturing and all of that type of stuff?
We buy it and buy the container load, and we make products right there in American Fork, right here. I mean, we're in Provo, but right there in American Fork. We make toothpaste, we make mouthwash, we make our nasal sprays, we make, make it all right there.
And how's it going? How's business?
Great.
Yeah.
I can't complain. I mean, during COVID, it had its ups and downs. It's actually really interesting because we didn't, as much as we were out there trying to share published data, the only times that we really had big upswings in our sales was when the FTC did stuff. Like when they sent us the warning letter, our sales went up.
Yeah.
When they sued us, our sales went up.
Yeah.
But but really what it was people that understand nasal hygiene that have been using it, and they'd hear this, they'd be like, "Oh, the FTC is going to try to shut them down," and they would go out and buy a bunch of product because they thought we were going to, be shut down.
Yeah.
Where is the majority of your business in the United States? Is it international?
No, most of it's here in the U.S.
Okay.
But we do sell in Canada, the UK. I mean, we sell in Germany. We sell in a little bit in Australia, South Africa. We sell a bunch in the Middle East.
Oh, very cool.
I do have a question about underwater welding I want to get to, but if you had a heat map of America, if I had to guess where the most sales would be, I'm going to say Vermont.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, there's got to be a demographic of folks who naturally are inclined.
I don't know that 20 years ago I would have agreed with you, but most people it's across the board. I mean, it's not a political group that's using it more than the other. I mean, we have, Republicans using it as much as liberals and independents. It's not an age group. I mean, the bigger people the biggest age group that used it 20 years ago was middle-aged people, and then that demographic actually skewed to older people, and now it's back down to a lot of younger people. I mean, there was one point where the number one product being stolen in the natural products retailers was our toothpaste.
Oh, that's probably a good indicator, right?
That's wild.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I mean, you don't want to be in a business where people won't even steal your things occasionally. That's not where you want to be. That's where broccoli hangs out.
My kids love broccoli.
Mine do too. I just, villainized it. But
did you just say you vanilla iced it?
Yeah,
I wish
you did. I'm just gonna give us an ice baby dance here in a second.
That would be bad. Underwater welding. You know how to do it, right?
Yeah.
Not for the faint of heart. Give us a story or two of like when you're deep under there and welding underwater, what you're working on, and any funny.
Well, most of the welding, I mean, that you call it underwater welding, but very, very seldom do you actually do any welding. Most of it's bolt work. You go down and it's just big. I mean, it's heavy industry, but you're doing it underwater.
Yeah.
I mean, you're using, when you go into the and I mean, to tell you how powerful, I guess, these tools are. We used, the pressure washers that you wash your driveway with. We used those and the wand on them would have to be 6 feet long, just to make sure. But we would cut steel pipes with those things.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
That's the pressure that's coming out of them. We were using rods, cutting torches, cut right through stone underwater.
Wait, why were you doing this?
Oil.
Because I was paid to.
Oh, so this is before. It's not for Xlear.
No.
Okay.
That's why I wanted to bring it up, because it's an interesting transition.
Yeah.
You're for sure the first underwater welder. And what oil rigs were you working on?
I worked on some in the Gulf of Mexico. I did a job at Peach Bottom Atomic Power Station. I mean, there's very, very few people who have been diving inside of a nuclear reactor. I'm one of them.
Yeah.
Wow.
But we did that job back in 96, I think. They had it shut down, and we were in there doing some repair work. And that was all welding stainless steel in the water. But yeah, they have interesting. But most of it it's not that exciting.
Well,
it's just, you go out and sit on an oil rig with a bunch of sweaty guys and hang out for a month at a time, or 2 or 3 until the job gets done, and then you go back on shore for a week and you have a fat bank account.
Yeah.
and
money.
and then a week later they're shipping you back out somewhere.
Sounds awesome, actually.
It sounds pretty good. Beautiful sunsets.
Yeah.
Little fishing, maybe. A lot of poker.
I'm not a fisher. No, we played cribbage
Cribbage.
for money.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. One of the divers taught me how to play it. And it was within one trip. I can't remember how long, but he just came in and just was totally pissed and wrote me a check and said, "Don't ever ask me to play again." It was a couple of $1,000.
Nice.
Back in the 90s, that meant something.
Hell yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, if you get somebody mad at you on the oil rig, there's nowhere else to go, right? You just have to have these awkward exchanges. Yeah. Oh, hey.
Well, he wasn't mad at me because he taught me how to play.
Yeah.
Well, what's next for Xlear, and how do you navigate all of this? It sounds like a lot of your focus is maybe on this regulation and lawsuits, or is that maybe not?
Well, it is because there's a lot of regulatory, and the reason why is because regulatory issues change from country to country, and they change, from day to day. And during the last 4 years, there's been a lot of regulatory changes going around. They're trying, nasal, I'm trying to think of how to say this, quickly without going into, a 5-hour tirade against our regulatory. But I'm trying to think how to say this. So cosmetics. So let me go back and say hygiene. What's the definition of hygiene? It's really to clean something with the goal of improving a health outcome. That's really the definition. And that's what nasal hygiene, that's what oral hygiene, that's what all that does. Hygiene companies are banned, they're barred by the government from making any claim about how their products help prevent illness. Okay? Soap companies can't go out and say, wash your hands to help stop the spread of disease. That's a drug claim. So you can't say that. Toothpaste companies, even though toothpaste without fluoride works just as effective, let me put it this way. Toothpaste without fluoride works more effectively than fluoride at preventing tooth decay. Adding fluoride to your toothpaste does help make it more effective. But toothpaste without fluoride is still very effective. The physical action of cleaning your teeth and getting all the plaque out there. But none of those companies are allowed to go out and educate the public about why hygiene is important, which is absolutely absurd. And if you go back to, the late 1800s up to maybe 1980, I don't know how old are you guys?
Early 80s.
In the early 80s? You were born then? So when you were a kid, did they have hygienists who would come into your school and they give you little pink pills and show where you have plaque and brush your teeth? So they don't do that anymore. Okay? Public health used to have these initiatives where they would go out and they would teach people, hey, wash your hands. They had them on TV. Hey, wash your hands. Brush your teeth, hygiene things. Again, the best way to stop the spread of disease is washing your hands. The best way for you to not get sick doesn't have to do with washing your hands. It has to do with washing your nose. Okay, because that's where you get sick most of the time.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay, you don't get sick through your hands. You get sick when you touch your hands to your nose, when you pick your nose, when you pick your nose and eat. But that's where you get sick. And so if you're using something that blocks adhesion in your nose, something that facilitates the action of washing the bacteria or the virus or the pathogen, whatever it is, out of your nose, but nobody's going out and teaching that. That's why very little of our marketing is focused to the consumer. It's all focused to the health practitioner because we have more leeway in what we can actually say to the physicians. We can't go out and say to you, wash your nose and it's going to help with your allergies and your asthma and your sinus infections and your chronic ear infections in your child. It's not going to, COVID and all this other stuff, because those are all drug claims. And so we have to go to the doctors and explain that, and the doctors hopefully say, hey, you know what? Using something like Xlear that has xylitol that we know blocks the ability of these pathogens to adhere to the tissue and also facilitates the cleansing much better than what salt water alone does, I'll start talking to my patients about that. And so it's a very slow, long process to work through, but we've been doing it successfully for a quarter of a century. And, we did it without having any issues until, COVID came along, and for some reason the FTC kept moving the goalposts or telling us they were moving them and suing us based on that.
Yeah, I can't get over that it's the FTC doing it. For some reason, that's like keeps freaking me out.
Yeah.
Well, it's going to start happening more and more. I mean, the person who wrote the rules, this is how crazy it is. And this is why I think the natural products industry, they need to get together. And the state they really need to jump on this before it becomes too big. But and I think this was a calculated move on the part of the FTC. But one of the lawyers at the FTC that drafted their new employee guidance, staff guidance that they're now suing people under, he actually left the FTC and now works for, I think it's AGG or AAG, the law firm that represents the Natural Products Association. So that when companies want to go to find out what they can do, he can teach them how to comply with their staff guidance. He's not teaching them how to push back and say, hey, this is the law. He's going in there and teaching them how to comply with the overreach.
That's so weird. Oh, crazy. Well, we could talk for hours too. You got to come back.
Anytime.
Yeah, that was incredible. And we probably just scratched the surface. But everybody check out Xlear. What's the website?
Xlear.com. And if you want to read any of the studies, that the government's telling us not to share, just go to xlear.com/science.
I love it.
Hopefully that clip doesn't end up in a lawsuit.
Yeah. What are they gonna do? Sue me?
Yeah.
All right, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.
Ryan Boswell.
Oh, we got the old Ryan Boswell, former Silicon Sloper.
President of Cold Plunge Studios.
Cold Plunge Studios. All right, that'll be fun. Okay, see you, everybody.